how we're ever going to make a decision. Those puppies were so cute, and did you see how that husky was communicating to its pup?
At least those dogs, Celeste, knew how to talk to each other.
Pets don't know how to talk to each other, hon. Only humans can communicate in a loving, respectful, and kind manner.
And humans also know how to listen to each other.
And they're slow to anger, you mean?
Look, I felt it was kind of useless to communicate to you my criteria for getting a puppy. Because your criteria seemed to be like, that's a cute puppy, we should get that one. And everyone that they showed you, it was the exact same thing.
Yeah, you said it. It's all about your criteria, just your criteria. Do you think we could come to an agreement by having a real conversation?
Sure, but first you're going to have to define to me what your definition of a real conversation is.
Okay, if you're open to discussing how a married couple can really communicate.
Okay. Would you agree that a healthy marriage is two people willing to do whatever it takes to communicate well to have a healthy marriage?
I'd agree to that. If you think about it, humans are social creatures, right? We relate, we talk, we communicate, we laugh, we eat cheese.
Yeah, and you would think with the amount of time that we spend talking in communication with other people that we'd actually learn how to communicate rather than just saying words.
Because talking is different than communicating, right? Communicating is respectful and patient. We hear the other person's views and try to understand them.
Yeah, and so real communication can be hard, right? So one thing that the world tells us is that we should always be looking out for number one, right? That I should always make my point heard and it's all about me. But that can be very destructive in a marriage.
So we have to figure out how we can also look out for the other person. I guess the simplest thing would be to take turns speaking.
Well, that's part of it. So communication happens when I speak, you listen, then you speak, then I listen. But that listening has to be intentional and it has to be active with the purpose of making sure that you understand the person.
I think listening is the hard part because often people look like they're listening, but really what they're doing is formulating their next comment. Even I've been guilty of that.
Sorry, what was that? I wasn't really listening.
Oh, haha, very funny.
No, seriously, I wasn't listening. I was trying to think of a Bible verse. This is James 1:19. It gives us instructions on how to communicate. This is what it says. Know this, my beloved brothers. Let every person be quick to hear, slow to speak, slow to anger. These principles hold true for every relationship, but even more so in marriage.
It's a lot different than the advice to make yourself heard or to fight for your rights. In marriage, we really need to work hard to make sure that we're listening to the other person. Maybe that's why God gave us 2 ears and only 1 mouth.
That's right, but Jesus even says that when we speak, we should be careful about the root of our speech. In Matthew 15:18, let me just find it here, it says, "But what comes out of the mouth proceeds from the heart, and this defiles a person."
So if we're feeling bitter towards our spouse or angry or sad or jealous, those emotions will come out in our words towards our spouse. Our words will also be sad or angry or bitter.
Yeah, that's right. So if you think about Colossians 4:6, it says that we shall always be gracious in our speech.
Yeah, or Matthew 7:12, the golden rule. We ought to treat people as we ourselves want to be treated.
That's true. And one of the things I find really interesting is that the closer we are in a relationship, sometimes it's harder to live out those principles in our life. So it's easier for me if it's somebody I just meet to treat them really well. But the people closest to me, I tend to lash out at it and don't treat well sometimes.
Yeah, I've noticed.
Sure.
Well, one of our problems, though, too, is just that we're so different. And we've got gender differences to boot. Like, even that, how do you think that gender differences play out in our difficulties of communication?
I don't know. God did make men and women different, but he didn't do it to frustrate us. He did it so we could complement each other.
Are you sure? Because if he did do it to frustrate us, he did a bang-up job. I feel frustrated sometimes, and I know you feel frustrated sometimes. Unless, of course, I'm misunderstanding you.
No, sometimes I do, but I'm sure. But I think what we need to be careful of is stereotypes and generalities. So sometimes we say things like, well, women are more emotional, but that's not always the case. It's usually one person in the couple is more emotional. So maybe the man is more emotional, or both people are really emotional. So we don't want to focus on the stereotypes, but we do need to realize that God made us different, and we need to know that in order to communicate.
Mm-hmm. And those differences, sometimes people blame those differences for making communication more difficult, but we can never use those differences as an excuse to just not communicate.
That's right. So it's always good for a couple to explore their differences, and the more that they know about each other, the more that they can communicate well with each other.
A lot of my friends actually complain that their husbands hardly talk to them. What advice would you give to someone who just doesn't want to talk?
Well, some of the best advice I've ever heard is it's okay to be a man of few words, but it's not okay to be a man of no words.
I think it could really help if, instead of devaluing our differences, if we saw them as a gift of God. That perspective would actually help us to communicate better, and it would also help us to trust God to help us to communicate better as well.
Yeah, and what a witness it would be if Christian couples would treat each other with love and respect and communicate well. The world would take notice, and it could be a great witness for Christ.
Okay, hun, so how about this? Let's get the 4 kids, we'll take them to the pet store, and together we'll decide on which puppy to take home.
Good luck with that, unless you want 4 puppies. If me and you can't make a decision together, imagine taking them into a pet store. How about we just take them, we tell them to evaluate, we'll come home, teach them how to communicate, and we'll make a decision together and go back tomorrow.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, so why don't you review what we talked about?
Mm-hmm. And then we'll go.
And then we'll go pick up the kids and we'll go.
The Bible gives us clear expectations and instructions for our communication that differs greatly from the counsel of the world. We need to be diligent to follow God's ways in this area. Men and women do communicate differently, but this is not an excuse for not obeying God's ways and striving for His standards of proper speech. How we speak and what we say comes out of the attitudes of our hearts, so we must be diligent to pray for and to foster patient, loving, other-centered attitudes.
You ready to buy a puppy?
Let's go!
Let's go.